Back to our C# beginner tutorial. In today's lesson, we're going to look at classes in C#. So let's go ahead and start Visual Studio. I think in the previous lesson, we looked at objects. We saw some of the reasons why we might need objects in our code. So as I promised in the previous lesson, today we're going to start off by looking at how to create classes. So for that, I'll just create a new project. Let's create a new project, a C# console application, and I'll call it class basics. And I'll put it on my desktop where we usually keep our tutorials, apps. Sorry, it's on the desktop, my apps folder. We call it create a new folder. We call it class basics. Okay, and then we click create to create the solution. Okay, today like I said, we're going to look at classes. To start off, let me just remove this. Okay, so to start off, I would like to, I think in the earlier classes, I did talk about this source file, program.cs source file. Okay, so what's a source file? Let me bring up Notepad. So it's spelled this way: source file. Okay, sourcefile, source file. So your source file is usually is just like a file, like a normal text file, or you usually write using Notepad. Okay. However, it contains your program code. Okay. So for example, if you look at this program.cs, these things, this using system, semicolon, namespace, that's everything you've written in here is actually residing inside the program.cs source file. Okay. Now, why am I talking about source file? The reason I'm talking about source file is because it is usually good practice that for each class that you create, you give it its own separate source file. Okay. So well, at sometimes in your programming career, you realize, okay, there are sometimes you might, for convenience reason, you might put more than one class in the same source file. However, it's not really something common within the programming world. So it's usually always better to have each class residing inside its own separate source file. Okay, and how do we create a class? We usually create a class by writing this keyword class. Okay, just like you can see here in the where this program class was created. Forget about the namespace, the using. I said I'm going to explain that later. Okay, so just focus on these lines of code from line 5 to line 11. Okay, so this is how you create a class. You start by writing the keyword class, class. Okay, and then you give a space, and then you write the name of the class. Okay, now this name, this program that is written here, can be any name. It's usually the name of your choice. Okay, whatever name you want to call that class. So for example, if I want to create like a car class, I can name the name of the class car. So in that case, when I'm writing after the class, my space, I'll just write car. okay, class car, okay, and then I open up this curly bracket, okay, and then I close the curly bracket here. Now, whatever I write in between those curly brackets are going to be the definition for that particular class, okay, that particular. So for example, this program class, this is the definition for this program class. So far it's a very uninteresting definition because there's nothing going on in there. It's just a main method that doesn't do anything, okay. So usually that's how a class is created, okay. So now it means that, okay, let me just create another class here. You remember in the previous lesson where we cited an example of a program where we hold details of workers, okay. We're going to create a class in this in this program, and we're going to call it employee, okay. That employee class is going to hold the details of an employee in our program, okay. Now to create that, all I do is CLASS space, then the name of the class. I want to call it employee, okay. I just write my employee. Notice I'm starting with a capital E. It's not necessary, okay. These are all identifiers, just like variables. The naming of variables, they follow the same rules of naming, okay. All identifiers follow the same rule. However, it is usually good practice for all your classes, always start your first letter with a capital letter, okay. After writing the employee, I now I give a carriage return and I open my curly bracket. Notice immediately I open my curly bracket, Visual Studio closes it for me, okay. So that's very convenient, and then I like to usually shift it to the next line. So and that's it. I've created my employee class, okay. So far it has no definition. It's like an empty class, so I need to create it. But really, this is how you create a class, okay. Now remember what I said. Notice I'm breaking the convention I gave you earlier, saying that each class should be in a separate source file. Notice that this program class and this employee class are now residing inside the program.cs source file, okay. Now we don't want that. Also, well, before I nuke that, I just want to show something to you. If you head on to your right hand side where you have your solution explorer, okay, look at your program.cs. Remember, this is a source file, okay. Now if you click on this triangle and show the contents of program.cs, notice what you have now. Notice that you have a program and you have an employee, okay, meaning that program is a class, employee is a class, okay. Just by creating this, just by writing this these lines of code, that defines our employee class. Immediately it shows us, it updates our solution explorer, and it tells us that inside our program.cs source file we have two classes available to us, okay. We have the program class and the employee class, okay. Now this is one way you create a class, which I do not recommend, okay. The other way we can create our class, let me go ahead and remove that, okay. The other way we can create our class is by going to our project menu, okay. So up here in the project, in the menu bar, you click on project, and then you click on add class, okay. That's the first thing. You click on add class. When you click on add class, you get this dialog box with some options, okay. Don't worry too much about the options. The good thing is that what you're looking for is the first thing at the top, okay. So it's saying the first thing is a class on top, okay. Now before you go ahead and select that, always make sure that when you create a class, it's also a good idea to always give the name of that class the same, that's the name of the source file that will hold that class, the same name as the class. Now, this is not necessary, okay? It's just a convention, okay? And I think if you use Unity, it's like a gaming engine. I think it kind of it mandates you to actually do that. Okay, so if you create a class, the name of the file that will hold that class has to be the same name as the, well, not a class per se. I think a script. Yeah, a script. So it's always good right from now. You should always make it your habit that the name of the class you want to create, make sure the name of that class is also the name of the source file. Okay, remember the difference: a class, a source file. A source file is just a text file that contains the code that defines the class. Okay, so remember we said we were going to call it employee. So I'm going to call it employee.cs, employee.cs. If you don't add the .cs, it will add it for you, but I always prefer to make sure that the .cs is there. By the way, the CS I think is short for C#, okay? So employee.cs, and I click on add, okay? So now, if you look at your right hand side now, what happens? Do you see the difference between now and the previous class we created? Remember, previously we had the employee class inside, residing under the program.cs source file. Okay, so we had to expand this, and then we saw a program and an employee class. Whereas now, when we have added a new source file, so now we have two source files. Okay, we have the employee source file and we have the program source file. Okay, and if we open the employee source file, we will find out that already Visual Studio has already created the class for us. If you look inside, you will see that class employee has already been written. Okay, if you look at it here, this is the code. Okay, now also remember, like I said in the initial class, sometimes you will open up your Visual Studio and you will find out that it's looking, let me just save that, it's looking like this. Okay, so you'll begin to wonder, where are all my code, where's the code I've written? Don't panic, just go to your solution explorer. You can see the name of our project is here. Under the under our solution, we have only one project, which is the class basics. If you expand that, you will see that you have dependencies. Don't worry about that, we didn't set that up. These are the two main things. This is a source file, this is another source file. So each source file you click, it opens that source file for you. Okay, so if I double click on the employee source file, the employee source file opens. Okay, if I double click on the program source file, the program source file opens. Okay, so this is our program source file and this is our employee source file. Okay, I'll just go ahead and remove some of these code that was added by Visual Studio, and I'll just leave using system there. Okay, so this is how you create a class in Visual Studio, or how you add a class in Visual Studio. Okay, now the next thing, how do you define the class? Okay, well, it's really all up to you. Just like everything in programming, everything takes the shape you give it. Okay, so remember in the previous lesson we're saying we want, let me just bring up Notepad. Okay, let's bring up Notepad and make a list of the things we want an employee to have. Okay, so we want, remember the main reason we're creating this employee class is because we want employee objects. Okay, we want people, like people that work in an office, we want to store their details. Okay, and we want for each person, for each worker, we want a single object to hold all the details of that worker. Okay, so inside the employee class, we are going to define all the details that each employee is going to have. Okay, so let's just make a list. Remember, we said we're going to need a first name, we're going to need a middle name. Okay, we're going to need a last name, we're going to need an ID number. Okay, we're going to need a gender. Okay, that's male or female. And finally, let's say we're going to need age. That's the age of the employee. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 items. We're going to need these 6 items to be that each employee is going to have all these variables embedded inside one object. Okay, that's the whole reason why we're creating an employee class. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, this is how we do that. First, we define variables. Remember how you define variables? However, here in the context of classes, those variables are called fields. Okay, they're still variables, but we usually call them fields because they kind of they are not local variables. Okay, they are kind of you can use them as long as you have access to that particular object. Okay, maybe we should just write the code and then I'll try to explain later. Okay, so remember our variables. For a first name, what's the best data type we can use to store something like a first name? Remember, for a first name, the best data type is string. For middle name is string. For last name is string. For ID number, we could use string, we could use number, but since I think it would be better to just use string, because some ID numbers are not just numbers. Some ID numbers are combination of alphanumeric characters. So it doesn't matter if you know that the program you're creating or the employees are all going to have numeric ID numbers, only numeric ID numbers. You can go ahead and use integers for the ID number. Okay. If you're not sure, then it's probably safest you just use a string. Okay, so we're going to use string for that. For gender, we could actually use a boolean, since a gender can only be male or female. So we could say if it's true, it's male. If it's false, it's female. But just to keep things simple, I think we'll also use string for the gender. Okay, and then for age, we'll use int. Okay, so an integer to just store the age. So let's go ahead and let me show you how you do that. So first, we say string. Let's bring up our notepad to just see. Okay, first name. Okay, we say string middle name. So I'm defining those variables: string last name, okay, and string ID number. Yeah, ID number. And what's next? Gender. Okay, string gender. And then finally, we said we were going to use an int for the age, int age. Okay. So if you notice, well, we're going to see it later. Classes are more like templates. Okay, they just like create a template where every object that comes out of that class is going to possess. Okay, so we've defined these items in this employee class. When we create an object of this employee class, you will find out that any object we create that comes out from this employee class is going to have this first name, middle name, last name, ID number, gender, age. Okay, that's why I say it's like a template. Okay, it's going to have all these variables, and then you can actually set the variable depending on each particular employee. Okay, let's just cut the talking and just go straight ahead and write the code. So after doing this, I'm just going to save. I'll go to File and click on Save All. Save All just saves all my source files. So for example, I have a program.cs source file, I have an employee source file. If I choose File and Save All, it's going to save all the source files, both the employee and the program. And if there's any other source file, it's going to save it. Okay. All right. Now, remember our entry point of our program is inside program.cs. Okay. The main method in program.cs is where our execution starts for our program. Okay. So let's go back to our main method. Now we're going to create an object. Okay, now imagine in our program we're going to create 3 employees. Okay, that's 3 employees that we're going to store their details. Okay, let's just bring up Notepad, and let's say these are the employees. Employee 1, okay, his first name is let's say Abdul. His last name is yeah, let's just use that. His middle name, let's say he doesn't have a middle name. Okay, his ID number is let's say 1 2 3 4 5, and his gender is male, and age is 32. Okay, so that's employee 1. Okay, and then suppose we have employee 2. His first name is let's say Asha. Middle name S dot, and last name John. Okay, and then finally our there's still a few more details. The ID number. Okay, the ID number, say let's say 54321. That's our ID number, and the age. Okay, gender is female, and age, let's say 25. And employee 3, the last one, we have first name as Shaq, middle name, no middle name, last name Solomon, and ID number, say 1 2 2 3 4. Okay, and gender male, and finally age, let's say 34. Okay, so these are our 3 employees. Okay, we want to store the information, we want to store their details, okay, in our program. Okay, notice how we're going to go about that. Remember, we have created our employee class. Okay, we have created our employee class that has the template. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create objects. We're going to create 3 different objects of the employee class, okay, that are going to contain all those details. Each object is going to serve as an employee. Okay, how do we do that? This is how you do that. You start by declaring the variable that is going to hold the object. Okay, now before I write anything, this is very important. Okay, for objects, not just objects, even data, any kind of data you're going to store in your program, you are going to, whenever you're going to store something, remember, you need a variable. Okay, you need a variable. Even if it's an object you're going to hold, you need a variable that will reference that object. Okay, Now, to create that variable, you have to declare, you have to tell the computer the type of object or the type of data that you're going to store, that variable is going to hold. Okay, remember, we want to create three different employee objects. So first we have to tell the computer, or we have to tell the compiler, that's the C# compiler, that we want it to reserve us a space where we can store an object of employee. Okay, and this is how you do it. You start by writing your employee. That's the employee, the normal way you write the employee class, and then you give a space and then the name of the variable. Okay, so we're going to call it employee1. Okay, now this is the variable. Employee1 is now our variable. Okay, however, at this point, it is not yet holding our employee object. It is not yet holding our employee object. It's just a variable, okay? And it has created like a space. The computer has, or the compiler has reserved a space within the computer memory where you're going to be able to store an employee object. Now, to create the object, you will need to call the constructor of the employee class. And to do that, this is how you do it. You say employee1 is equal, that's the assignation symbol, you assign it new. Okay, this is how you call the constructor of a class. You have to write this new keyword. This new is a keyword. Okay, this is how you do it, new. Then you write the name of the class again. The name of the class is employee, and then you open a bracket and you close a bracket and then end it with a semicolon. Okay, now by doing this, you have created an object of employee class, and it's residing inside employee1 variable. Okay, so when you want to access each item, so for example, if you want to access this first name of this employee1, you just write employee1 the first name. Okay, let's just go ahead and do that. So let's initialize this employee1 using this first employee1. Okay, that's using these details. So we're going to is there any way I can put these side by side? I think I should be able to do that. Yes, we can. So we'll just put them side by side so I'm able to see what I'm typing. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and write employee1 dot, remember the period. Okay, sorry, there's something I forgot to mention. If we go back to our employee class, even though these variables have been created, or these fields have been created, they are actually private. The reason they are private is because we haven't really set a modifier, an access modifier for them. So by default, they are made private. Okay. Also, I think at this point, I should point out that for your classes, always make sure you make them public. Okay, so you should make it, the access modifier for your classes should be public class. Always add a public before your class. The same thing with these variables or fields of the class. If you leave it like this, it means they are private. You can only use them within the employee class. Okay. However, if you want to be able to use them outside the employee class, you will have to add a public access modifier before defining them. Okay, so I'm going to add public here, and that was why when we put that period, we were not able to see those variables. Okay, so I'm going to add public. Okay, so we've now made all of them public. I'll go ahead and save. I'll go to file, save all, and then we head back to our program.cs. And now notice the difference. If I put employee1 dot, you can see now we have all our variables. We have the age, we have the first name, we have the gender, we have the ID number, we have the last name. All these variables are now available, and they are all bundled under employee1. Okay, so we can say employee1 dot first name is equal to and then we set the first name Abdul. Okay, and sorry, not that. Okay, my semicolon should come after the closing double quotes. Okay, and then employee1 dot middle name. Okay, he doesn't have a middle name, so we'll just set it as empty string. And then employee1 dot last name is equal to we set the last name as OTEE, and then employee1 dot ID number is equal to 1 2 3 4 5. Remember, ID number is a string, so we put the 1 2 3 4 5, that's the numbers, we put them inside double quotes, okay, because it's a string. And then employee1 dot gender equals male. That's also a string, so we're going to put it inside quotes. Okay, and then employee1 dot age is equal to 32. Okay, so remember, the age is not a string, the age is an int, so that's why we're not putting it inside quotation marks. Okay, so by doing this, you can see we have initialized employee1. Okay, so we can go ahead and do something similar for employee2. So to create employee2, we first start by saying employee2. So employee2 is now a new variable, okay, which we've just declared it. Okay, and then we say employee2 is equal to new employee. By doing this, by running this line now, we have created another object. Whenever you call new followed by the name of a class, actually this is a constructor, okay, of the class, but it usually, the constructor of a class has the same name as the class. Okay, by doing this, you have created a new object. Now this object is different from this object entirely. Okay, now you can set we go ahead and set the details for employee2. I know this is looking tedious, and there's a reason why I'm forcing us to do it this way. I just want us to understand the concepts, okay? How a class is created, how a class is initialized, and then after this, all this tedious work of initializing an object of a class, I will show you the importance of your own user created constructor. Okay, so maybe in the next lesson we'll see how to simplify the initialization of an object. Okay, so employee2 dot first name, we'll just go ahead and take these names, Asha, okay, Asha, and then s dot John, and 54321, 54321, and female, and 25, so age is 25. Okay, So we go ahead and initialize. We create the third employee and initialize. So employee 3. This will be employee 3. We create a new object and we set the details for employee 3. Okay, so first name is Shaq. No middle name, so just leave it as an empty string. Last name is Solomon, and the ID number is 12234, and gender is male, and the age is 34. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save file, save all, and yes, so I think we can go ahead and minimize that. We're done with that, and enlarge our Visual Studio. So by writing this code, what we've done is we have actually created 3 different employees, and we have also set the process of setting these data or variables or fields of each employee is known as initialization. So this object initialization, we're initializing employee 1 object. Okay, remember employee 1 is a variable, but it's holding an object of employee class. Okay, so by doing this, it is the object which employee 1 is holding. Okay, that particular object is what is being initialized. Okay, so we initialize all the variables, and we can go ahead after initialization. I think we should do something by, maybe we should write out so that we can have something to display in our code, in our program, in our output. Let's go ahead and say console dot write line employee, or let me just make it a bit simpler by creating a method. Okay, I know this is wrong. Okay, well, not wrong per se, it is not advisable to have a method that is supposed to display the details of an employee outside the employee class. Okay, this method is supposed to be inside the employee class, but I just want us to do it this way for now, and then we'll see the advantage of doing it the other way. Okay, so public, we're going to make it a void method, and we're going to say show employee details. Okay, open your normal bracket, and then inside here, what you're going to pass is an employee. So that's why you're creating the data type of employee, and then you can call it employee. So why am I writing it as employee here and not employee 1? The reason I'm writing it as employee here is because this is a local variable. It only resides within this these curly brackets that I'm going to write now, within these curly brackets. Okay, and it's usually going to take the form of whatever object, whatever employee object we pass. So if we pass this particular employee object, that's employee 2, it's going to take the form of employee 2. Okay, if we pass in employee 1, it's going to take the form of employee 1. Okay, so inside here, we're going to say console dot write line name, or let's say let's say name, I'm going to say by the way, I think I should start showing you some shortcuts of writing strings, of concatenating strings. Okay, so we're used to using this plus symbol. An easier way you can concatenate strings using this dollar sign symbol. Okay, so you put the dollar sign symbol before, just before the opening quotation mark. Okay, and then inside the quotation marks you can use curly brackets. Okay, whatever you write inside the curly bracket is going to be taken as a variable. Okay, and it is the contents of that variable that will be displayed. Okay, so inside the curly brackets we can write first name, employee dot first name. Okay, then we give a space, employee. Oh, sorry, we'll need the curly brackets again since we're writing a second one. Another variable, employee dot. There's someone at the door. I'll just pause it and come back. Sorry, not that. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Someone was at the door. I pause. Okay, so let's just try and quickly. I think this has gone too long. I'll try and finish up soon. Employee dot middle name, and then give a space. Put a curly bracket. Employee dot last name, and so that's the line that will display the employee's name. That's the first name, his first name, his middle name, his last name. So in case you're confused what's going on here, notice I said this is just like I want to show you an easy way of concatenating strings. Okay, so you usually start with just a dollar sign just before the quotation, the opening double quotes. Okay, and notice this where the closing double quotes is. Okay, now inside you can write normal text. Whatever normal text you write is going to, if you notice, the normal text is appearing in kind of brownish color. Okay, so whatever you type there, name and a colon. Now if you put an open curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, whatever is in between the open curly bracket and the closing curly bracket is not going to be treated as a normal string. It's going to be treated as if it is a variable. Okay, so it is the content of that variable that will be displayed. Okay, the same thing goes here. Notice the reason I'm closing the I'm closing the curly bracket is because I need a space. I need a space here. Okay, also that's the end of this variable. Okay, so I need a space here, so I close the curly bracket, I give the space. Notice this space is now, even though you can't see it because it's supposed, if you could see it, it would have been in color brown. Okay, because it's a normal literal string. And then you open the curly bracket again, whatever you type in there is a normal variable, which is employee dot middle name, and then you close the bracket, another space, and then so it's going to show whatever the employee's first name is, whatever the employee's middle name is, and whatever the employee's last name is. Also remember that employee here is going to take the form of whatever employee. Remember, this is a method, show employee details, and we're going to call it from here. So I'm just defining the method now. When we call the method, we're going to choose which employee we want to display. Okay, and that's why here I'm saying employee here, this particular variable is going to take, is a local variable. It's going to take the form of whatever employee we pass it here when we call this show employee details. I just hope I'm not making this more difficult or more complex than it already is. So let's just go ahead and finish up. Console.writeLine. So we're going to write another line. We'll say the ID number, and then a colon, and then inside the curly brackets we write the employee dot ID number. Okay. Okay, and then console dot write line sorry the what's next? I think remain the age. Okay, the gender. Gender. So we'll just open the curly bracket, close the curly bracket, employee dot gender. Okay, don't forget your semicolon at the end. Then console dot write line, put your $sign. I know this $sign of a thing is going to confuse you. Anyway, if you're not comfortable using the $sign, just go ahead and use the normal concatenation plus string concatenation we've been using all along. Doesn't really matter. Okay. The main thing is that you get it working. Okay. Finally, the age. So age and open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and we type in we display the age. Okay, the reason why the age is complaining is because age is an integer and it's expecting a string here. So we need to convert it to string by writing age dot to string. Is there a to string method on an int? No, there's not. Oh, okay, it's because we forgot to add the employee dot age. Okay, so there it is. I think it's happy. We don't even need to convert it to a string. Okay, and that's it. So here, when we want to call this method show employee details, we're going to say show employee details, and then inside the bracket as argument, we need to pass the whichever one we want to be displayed. So suppose we want employee 3 details to be displayed. So we'll just write employee 3, and then we close our bracket and a semicolon. Why is it complaining? Okay, it's because it's not static. So I'll have to make this static for now. I said don't worry about the static. Now that we're doing classes, at some point I'll explain what the static means. I think you've seen the use of public, haven't you? When we did this, without this public, that's if we make this private, notice what happens. I'll just save this, go back. That's I only made the first name private. Now notice what happens. You can see employee that first name is complaining, same as employee 2 that first name. They are all complaining. The reason is look at what it's saying. Employee dot first name is inaccessible due to its protection level. Okay, if you make a field private, that makes it you can only use it within here. Okay, so if I should be writing code here, I'll be able to use this first name. But the moment I go outside that class, that's outside this public class employee, and I come down here and I'm trying to use that first name, it will not allow me. Okay, so that's the use. So gradually we'll be seeing the use of all these public, private, static, and other things. So as we go ahead in our classes, we'll be seeing the use of each one of them. Okay, all right. Yes, that's it. So we pass employee 3, and we can run this program. So we expect to see the details of employee 3 to be displayed. Okay, so we go ahead and run that program. Yes, so the name is Shaq. There's no middle name, Solomon, and his ID number is 12234. His gender is male. His age is 34. Okay. Now, remember the whole point of this class is to show you the importance of objects, or sorry, is to show you actually how to create a class. And I've taken it a little step further by showing you how to create an object, which we've done here. We actually created 3 different objects of this employee class. Okay, and we went ahead and created a method here that displays the details of an employee. Okay, the details of an employee, remember, details of an employee, not a particular employee. So it means that when you're going to call the method, this particular method, you'll need to pass it the employee you want it to display. Okay, which I said when I started, I said it's not the most convenient way to do it, because actually a class can actually have a method. Okay, so this method, maybe in the next class we're going to see how we're going to migrate this method into here, so that when we want to display the details of an employee, all we need to do is just say employee 3, for example, employee 3 dot show details, and it shows us the details of that employee. Okay, let's go ahead and change this from employee 3. Let's change it to employee 1 and run the program. I've saved it by Control S and then click play again. And you can see now we're seeing the details of employee 1. Name, Abdul, no middle name, OT, ID number, this, gender, this, age, this. Okay. Just for gender equality, let's just go ahead and change that to employee 2 and run it again. And yeah, there we go. So name Asha as John, ID number this, gender female, age 25. Okay, so this is how you create a class. I know I've covered a lot of ground in this lesson, but I hope you've been able to get at least how to create a class. We've seen how to create a class within that 2 classes in one source file. We saw that earlier, and then we saw how to add a class by adding a new source file which contains the class, and then we saw how to code or define the contents of that class, or how to define the class. And then finally we saw how to create. First we declare a variable that is going to hold the object of a class, and then we create the object. This is where we create the object of the class, and then we store it inside that variable that we declared. And then we saw how we initialize that particular object. And then we went ahead and created 3 different objects of the employee class. And then we created a method that allows us to display the details of of an employee. And then we use that method to show the details of an employee. I think this class is long enough, and see you in the next lesson.